Welcome to the Western Boone Safety Forum. We have two representatives with us. We have Representative Tim Brown from District 2041. And then on the House, there's 100 seats. It's a 2-year term. And there you can see his district. Then on my other side, we've got Senator Phil Boots from District 23, and he's a senator. There's 50 of them in the state, and they have 4-year terms. Every 2 years, a different set is up. Representative Brown, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us here today. I'm Tim Brown. I've been in the Indiana House since 1995. As I said, run every 2 years for this position. I'm a retired physician. I got involved in politics because of healthcare issues, and presently, though, serve as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and so that takes quite a bit of my time, which is helping write the budget for school funding, as well as for higher education, for corrections, for highways, those sorts of things.
And Senator Boots.
Good morning. I'm Senator Phil Boots from Senate District 23, which encompasses most of Boone County, all of Montgomery County, Fountain County, Warren County, Vermilion County, and Park County. So I have a kind of a diverse district. I've been in Senate since 2006. I reside in just south of Crawfordsville, a place called Lake Holiday, and have a business in Crawfordsville, Waynetown, Waveland, selling groceries and stuff to convenience stores. So I'm the chairman of the Pensions and Labor Committee, which involves public pensions, as well as I'm on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, which is the comparable committee to the Ways and Means in the House. So we also deal with the budget and school funding and all the state funding levels. So that's my background.
Okay, so we have a number of students who have volunteered to come ask questions over school safety. And Representative Brown, Senator Boots will sort of alternate answering the questions. First question.
Hi, I'm Kara. I'm a junior. And much of our time and focus is being oriented towards the political debates that have been going on for years. What are we doing now to make sure that schools are safe while we try to figure out the root of the problem?
Very good question, thank you. We've actually been doing quite a bit in the state of Indiana. We are recognized as one of the top 2 states as far as dealing with schools security and safety. What we have found since 2014 is we have spent $45 million in different grant programs dealing with personnel, school resource officers in buildings, as well as grants to do building or physical facility upgrading as needed by the local demands. Everything is locally driven because it's a school board then decision about what to do with the grant or to apply to the grant. But there's been 2 or 3 different levels of grants going out through the years. We are one of only state in the country that talk about having a school resource officer for every corporation.
Would you like to add anything?
No, I concur with Representative Brown. We've worked very hard to make certain that our schools are as safe as we can possibly make them. It's been proven that school resource officers, someone in the school who can relate with the kids, knows the kids and the students, their personal likes and dislikes, et cetera, is probably the best possible way we can do it. We do have what's called the safest school in the nation in Shelby County and Southwestern School Corporation. It's been featured on NBC News and various other places, and actually the individuals from Parkland and Miami or whatever that area was have been to visit that, as a matter of fact, just last week with the sheriff and all the players down there and our attorney general. So we can make a school as a fortress if that's what you choose to do it. But we think that probably the best avenue is a school resource officer, and that's where we've concentrated most of our granting on and our focus. So, you know, it's top of our priority. We want to make schools safe, but we also want them to make them personable and welcoming to their students and the population that use the facilities.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Coyne, I'm a freshman. The questions that were just asked, I have to add on to a few of them. On making schools safer, do you think in any way, living in a conservative or more rural area in the state of Indiana, how do you think people react to the ideas you have to make schools safer?
How will people react? You know, every school corporation is different, and you bring up that diversity we have across the state, urban versus rural areas. Senator Boots was talking about this corporation, and they're a very rural area, so far away from the sheriff's office, far away from the resources of the county seat. And so that was their concern. It's a notification system, almost instantaneous, to get help as soon as needed. But also one of the things we're dealing with is just some things locally to go through the school safety plan that we require of each corporation to have. And, you know, are the doors being locked? You know, have they been broken? I hear anecdotal reports, you know, that, you know, to make things easier in and out of the building during recess, teachers are propping doors open. You know, that doesn't make things safe. So we tend to live in an environment where we think the risk is, and we don't feel as much of a risk in an area like Western Boone and or rural Indiana.
You know, I agree that, you know, in rural areas, generally, this is not where the sick individuals are focusing their whatever they want to do. You know, I think that for the most part, rural areas are, as you said, conservative areas, and parents want their children to be responsible, and they take responsibility for them, and they guide them and counsel them. And so I don't think it's as big a concern in rural areas, but obviously we never know what person is going to snap at what time. And so we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be careful. And so we do have to put security systems into place and make certain that everybody is comfortable. We want all the students to come to a learning place and learn, as opposed to being concerned about what their fellow students might or might not do, or some outside entity that might come and do something. So I think that, you know, our discussion today has to focus primarily on the sociological issues as well as the school safety issue, because you know, I think that our population has become less responsible for or towards authority. They're less. They just don't feel responsible and don't want to abide by authority. It's, you know, when we have people who are targeting police officers and people who are targeting students, you know, what kind of person actually makes that decision that comes out and says, I want to kill somebody? I don't care who it is, whether it's a student or whatever. I mean, there's a reason for that. So I think in a rural community, it's obviously smaller population, and therefore people know each other more than or better than they do in a well-populated area where somebody could get lost in the system. So I think that's primarily what we need to look at is the sociological issues.
I have one last question. Do you have any other plans to making schools safer without making them confined?
We don't, I mean, as we said, I think the school resource officer is obviously the number one thing that we can do, and try and provide funding for those individuals so that every school has one available. That's not a confining issue, I don't believe. I think that, you know, schools now lock their doors as a general practice, and so just having somebody in the school that is aware of what's going on and can respond in a certain case, then I think that's the best thing to do.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for coming and talking about this crucial issue. My name's Jet McClaskey. I'm a junior. My first question is, what is the status of universal background checks in Indiana, and how do you guys feel about concerning that matter?
You talking about for gun ownership? Or?
Yes.
Oh, I think that's a mandatory thing. I don't know that we've addressed that beyond what we already currently have in law. But yes, there should be, anybody who's purchasing a weapon should have a background check, a universal background check, and make certain that's true. And you know, if you go to a retailer or whatever, a sporting goods shop, you have to do that. If you go to a gun show, you have to do that. It's the private sales that are the issue, and I don't know how we get into that. You know, that issue between the two individuals buying and selling weapons that they probably purchased legally and had the background check done on them. So I don't know how, I don't know enough about it to know how to get into that realm.
And I think some of your questions related to gun shows, where again, that's more of a private party, person-to-person transaction. Yeah. And you have to have a license, which requires background check to own and carry a gun in the state of Indiana at the present time. So, I mean, they're breaking the law if they don't have that and they purchase a gun. So enforcing the law is what we need to do. The rule of law is important, and creating more laws won't necessarily make that more important than the law that's already on the book. But it is an issue, and I think we'll continue to look at it going forward.
And my second question is arming teachers. That's been a big debate. President Trump has also talked about that. And is this the solution, do you guys think?
I think that's a local decision. I mean, I think a local school board, if they want to take up that policy, I don't necessarily universally think it's the answer going forward. But again, if that's what everybody locally, I mean, and again, different rural areas will have different feelings. I mean, to be honest, Montana or Western Boone may have a different thought than you know, North Central High School in Indianapolis. So everybody has a different take on that.
I agree that it's potentially, it could be a good thing, but the teacher has to be well vetted and has to go through extensive training before you would ever allow them to carry a weapon into the school, and background checks, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a local decision. Some teachers want to do it, and others obviously do not have any desire to do it. So I'm okay with allowing people to make that decision on their own. But school boards will decide, I think, what's best for their facilities.
Thank you, Jet.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dalton Davis, and I'm a senior. And I'm not naive enough to know that if somebody really wanted to come into really any school and cause harm, that they would and could be able to. And as a concealed carry permit holder myself, and I have 100% trust and faith that Officer McLean will do his best to protect us and save us. But from my point of view, I would feel a lot safer if I knew that there were more individuals armed in the school, such as teachers, because even when I go out in public and I know someone's carrying, I feel safer, because even though we live in a rural community, anything can happen at any time. You just don't know. So basically, is what I'm trying to ask here is, if a school corporation does choose to arm teachers, do you think that there would be any grants or funding from the state to help pay for their concealed carry permit and training and extensive things like that?
Well, Dalton, thank you, and appreciate your words and understanding that, you know, that incidents occurs for a lot of different reasons. As far as funding for that training, I don't know if our school security grants would go to individual teachers. I think that's something we could look at to allow the local board policies to have some flexibility in using those monies. I think statewide, you know, there's 150 senators and representatives. You probably wouldn't get a majority opinion to say we're going to use state taxpayer money to train having guns in schools with teachers. I think that'd be more an individual responsibility.
I agree. I mean, it would be great if we had an unlimited source of funding, but we do not. And so we have to decide where we're going to prioritize our dollars. If the money that's already available and money that we may well appropriate in the future for school safety, if it can be utilized in that manner, I have no idea that we've had that discussion. But you know, I appreciate you bringing that forward, and we can certainly discuss it in our caucuses and decide whether that's a good use of the money or not.
So last question, when Jet was kind of talking about, you guys said that you felt you would be okay with the school board kind of having some flexibility in the community on what they think they should arm teachers or not. Do you guys personally think that would be a reasonable and good, I don't want to say solution because I don't know if there's anything that's 100% going to stop it all, but do you think that would be a good way to limit it? Because, I mean, if teachers carry in school or outside of school, the same chances of something bad are still there. Just because we're in a school doesn't mean that it's always 100% safe.
Well, obviously, you know, we'll go back to the old cliche that the person to stop a person with a gun is another person with a gun. And I think that we've proven, I go back to, you know, my age shows when I talk about the hijackings that took place on airplanes. When they put armed marshals on those airplanes, hijacking stopped. People are not going to go into a place where they may, excuse me, risk their own lives. Mm-hmm. So if they know that there's people in there with weapons that are throughout the school, then they probably are less likely to choose that location. I mean, you know, one of my favorite things that I've seen on the internet is the guy that puts a sign in his yard with an arrow towards his neighbor, said, "This guy hates guns." I'm an NRA member. So as I understand it, I don't believe that any of these incidents that have occurred have been carried out by individuals who have gone through the background checks and who are licensed. So if you have teachers who are licensed and they've been through the vetting, et cetera, I think that that's a good plan to put forward.
I think since we represent, you know, as a House member, I represent 66,000 in the District 41, Montgomery, Boone, and Tippecanoe County, that it's really very evenly split about what we should do and not do. In most issues like this that are evenly split over time in society, it does take building of a consensus to move the path forward. To try and force it on, you know, our population as a whole in the state when it's so evenly split would be very disruptive also.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alden.
My name is Miles Clutter, and I'm a senior. I'd like to know what is the status of laws regarding semi-automatic rifles and bump stocks in the state, and is there currently any movement to reform these laws?
I think there has been some discussion about bump stocks. You know, it was a term I didn't really understand until some of the recent incidents in Las Vegas and Parkland. And so that's not necessarily how a rifle or a firearm was made. And so have had some discussion about bump stocks. I think it's a little too early to say whether we'll restrict those. Semi-automatic, I think, is a little bit different. I mean, our Constitution doesn't list out different firearms that we have a right to bear. And in fact, in the 1700s, they were talking about the assault rifles of the time, that they were okay to bear arms. And so therefore, once you start forming a list, what goes on and goes off becomes very problematic.
Yeah, I mean, the discussion needs to be had about bump stocks and high-capacity magazines. I don't think that infringes on anybody's right to bear arms. It's, there's, in my opinion, there's just no personal reason to have a bump stock or a high-capacity magazine if you're hunting or you're just shooting for fun or whatever it may be for sport. So I think that's a discussion we need to have. My concern is, obviously, if we do it at the state level, what does it do at the national level? Because if we control it and Illinois doesn't and Michigan doesn't and Kentucky doesn't, then what have we accomplished? I mean, we're just punishing the citizens of Indiana, and I don't know that that's necessarily punishing, but we're restricting people in Indiana and not in other areas, and they can obviously go across the border, you know, drive a couple hours and purchase something we just made illegal and hide it in your house or your car. So it's a discussion that I think we need to have, but I think it should be national. I believe that's actually occurring, and I hope something's done about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Micaiah, and I'm a 7th grader here at Webo. And earlier you mentioned that this is a more rural area, which makes it kind of less of a target. And I was wondering if you think that since we're less of a target, do you think that our school or other rural schools ever get like overlooked or maybe not the same protection that other schools might be getting?
I think my opinion is you're not necessarily less of a target. The risk isn't perceived as great as in an urban area. And so therefore, the precautions, and again, anecdotally, you know, I prop the door open because I don't perceive the risk being here. I think we do not distinguish between rural and urban in the state of Indiana, and what we've tried to do through the Department of Education and Department of Homeland Security, we ask every corporation, you know, rural and urban, to have a safety plan, to look at a resource officer. And part of the law that we want to come back is to have more money available for grants for what's needed locally. Because you may need to secure your front door and, you know, coming in here today, buzzing in and things like that. You know, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, that wasn't even done. And there still are schools out there that don't have that buzz-in system going forward. You know, in glass at the front entrance that might be a little bit more resistant if an intruder comes and tries to shoot through that glass, just to slow them down for an intruder for a while. That might be important versus adding 2 or 3 more people within the building.
Thank you. And do you think that since you said that the community itself or like the state itself gets to like kind of choose themselves whether they think that teachers should be able to be armed or not to like keep us safe, do you think that the students or anything have any say in that, since it is kind of their safety that we're worrying about?
Certainly, every citizen of the school corporation that's involved should be going to the school board and saying, yes, we like this, or no, we don't. And the students have a voice in that as well, and probably have a stronger voice than maybe outsiders do. But it is a discussion that should take place, and it's a decision that will be made locally, and the input will be, I'm sure, taken in either way, pro and con. So yes, the students should have a definite input into that decision.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Grace and I'm a junior here. Do you think that a ban on automatic weapons like the one that was put in place in 1994 for 10 years could be effective again today?
I don't believe that the ban has anything to do with it. I mean, you're talking about a ban on selling these weapons, and I believe there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not perhaps millions of these weapons already out in the society, out in our citizenry. And so banning them today is not going to stop somebody from getting a hold of them. All it's going to do is make it more expensive, more difficult maybe to get a hold of. But if somebody wants to do harm or wants to own one of those, they'll be able to buy one whether it be in Indiana or anywhere else. So I personally don't believe that a ban on automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons is going to make a difference.
I guess I would concur that I don't think the ban makes a difference. I think one of the things we've seen, as Senator Boots outlined it in an earlier question, is why we are seeing escalation is some of our outreach in society. You know, being able to detain somebody that we know may be problematic or have problems and voice concerns and voice threats, those sorts of things. It's a balance of liberty versus detention and giving up those liberties.
And my second question, so other countries have put restrictions on firearms, and they've had research have been done that, for example, Australia, they put a ban on automatic weapons after the Port Arthur massacre, and in 1996 there was a reported 69 gun-related homicides compared to only 30 in 2012. So do you think that maybe we could follow the footsteps of other countries who have put bans on guns like that?
Well, it is in our Constitution, so we'd have to change the Constitution first, which would take 2/3 of the states to ratify an amendment to the Constitution.
I'd like to point out that, you know, we talk a lot about guns, and guns are obviously a weapon of choice for many. But I'll point out that in London, England, which is a gun-free area, February and March, there were 50 murders, all carried out by knives. No guns. That was more murders than occurred in New York City. And now they're talking about how they're going to ban knives that have a point. They're going to create a new law that you can only purchase a knife that has a rounded point on it, which, you know, I don't know what that's going to accomplish. So now you don't stab somebody, but you can still slice them. So I don't know how far you go with this whole thing, but, you know, we are a country that has a constitution that says that you have a right to bear arms. You know, you're talking about some of these other countries that have had a ban forever and don't have that in their basic constitution. So just banning these weapons is not going to, in my opinion, not going to make a difference. If people, yeah, I think I go back to my earlier point, I think we just have a disrespect of ourselves, our fellow persons. You know, why anybody would make a decision to kill somebody on their own, but, you know, even more strange to me is how anybody would ever make the decision to go into a school and kill kids. That, you know, so it's an authority, it's a society thing that we need to change, and that's the discussion that I think we need to have overall. But I don't believe a ban is going to make any difference.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Izzy, and I am a sophomore. My question is, would teachers be receiving more benefits or be paid more to be armed?
The state of Indiana does not necessarily set teacher salary or incentives. That would be a local decision. The school funding we give actually in kind of an allotment monthly about how that's paid out. So it would be, again, local decision, but again, the state of Indiana does not set teachers' pay.
That's exactly right. It would be a local school board decision on how they want to allocate their dollars. There's nothing that would stop them from, you know, incentivizing somebody to carry a weapon if that's what they chose to do. But we at the state don't make that decision.
Would it be more cost effective if you paid teachers to have guns instead of police officers? Because in my mind, it would be better to hire more police officers, and I don't understand why would we be arming teachers.
I think that's a very great question, and it's all about priorities going forward. So I don't, yes, I think that's what we do in the budget making process. We talk about priorities.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add, no.
And then one last question. In your budget, do you think that it's necessary to invest more money into more guidance counselors and psychologists in schools to prevent school shootings in that way?
Great question, and since I've been involved in the Ways and Means process and budgeting since 2013, we've actually put in our Family and Social Service Administration increase money for social workers and master level social workers to start to come into schools through programs. There's a couple specific programs out there dealing with the health and well-being of students. And what they see is increased career and graduation rates and ready for college. They also do studies related to stress and anxiety and conflict and see reduction of that. We'll continue, I will commit that we'll continue to look at that and increase funding, but there's a whole lot of programs that are available out there in this area. They're outside of school funding. They're in other departments.
We discuss mental health at the legislative level every year and try to allocate more dollars for mental health counseling and social workers, if that's what you want to call them. There's a shortage of those individuals that are willing to do that work. And so it's a difficult thing when schools have to go outside their normal employee base and hire somebody to do vocational, or not vocational, but counseling, et cetera. So yes, it's a big concern that we have, and it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg. We incarcerate, a huge amount of people, but if we could address their mental health issues, because 99% of those people are in our prisons or jails because of some social issue that they went through, some mental health thing. So we're spending millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars on incarcerating our people that we don't like. And if we could somehow reallocate those dollars to mental health, I think we could stop the people from going into making the decisions that you're talking about. But it's a great discussion. It's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Charlotte Klain. So I wondered if a school was to theoretically add more school resource officers to the school, would it affect such departments such as the art department or sports department, and how well they are functioning?
It could. Again, budgeting is about priorities and which priority is important at that time and at different times in our history or different times of the economy. Different priorities are important. So again, we distribute money from the state in an allotment, and so the decisions to be made are in a priority, some decisions back at the local level. One of the things looking at is the recession, the Great Recession of 2009. Everybody had to tighten their belt in that, and schools were a part of that belt tightening, and it was unfortunate. But this is where then people who were used to doing some sort of task or job, and I will say guidance counselors had to do other activities because of belt tightening type of thing. And so we get into different roles based on the economy, based on the priorities, based on the economic cycle of the times. Things won't necessarily always be flush, and so we have to look at what's sustainable long term.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that. Obviously, we have to prioritize the state dollars that we dole out to different agencies, schools obviously being 50-some% of our total budget. And the resource officer, the school safety grants that are available are outside that school funding. It's a grant that you apply for. But the school has to decide how they're going to best spend their dollars, just like we have to. So we give them X amount of dollars, then they have to prioritize how they're going to spend that. So yeah, it definitely could, if they decide that they need more safety or more safety officers, then maybe they give up an art class. I don't know. It's a local decision.
I also wondered, what was your guys' opinion on raising the age limit to purchase guns?
I have a problem with that. If I can join the Army at 18 years old, don't make me wait to 21 to buy a gun. And I still want to point out 99.9% of the people who have guns or weapons of some kind don't abuse them. They're for their own personal safety or sport or whatever it may be. It's that 1/10 of 1% that we have to be concerned about and how you identify those. Just raising the age is not going to make that difference, I don't think. I mean, unless you want to make it to 40, then there's a difference.
I think you bring up an interesting question because the science is about some brain maturation and things related still going on in the late teenage years up to about 21, 22. We have an age limit to purchase cigarettes in this state, and how many people do we know that abide by that law? There's a lot of, probably your friends and I know people that violate that because they want to. So it is a little bit arbitrary. So should we raise a lot of things up to age 21? It's a great thing related to, again, maturation of the brain and decision making. But again, there are the issues about being an adult and at what time do we legally look at you as an adult.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm in 8th grade. In the 1930s, Kinder Eggs were banned to protect our children. My question is, why did we ban a candy for safety reasons, but we still have high-powered guns when they are only made to harm?
Go ahead.
What did we ban? I don't know. I couldn't.
Kinder Eggs.
Kinder Eggs. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Kinder Eggs. You know, again, it's back to our Bill of Rights and what we created in 1787 under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights is a document from those in power and authority to the citizens that are being governed. And the Constitution would not have been accepted not for the Bill of Rights. We tried under the Articles of Confederation and it fell apart. And a war had just been fought over British soldiers having guns and some of the colonials not having guns, about British soldiers coming into your home and confiscating your property unlawfully, about British soldiers taking you away and locking you up without any charges being filed in due process. So that Bill of Rights is a package as far as given to the citizens for what we fought for. And so we have to change the Constitution. If you feel that package is not applicable in 2018, the process is for us to have the discussion and change the Constitution.
Once again, you're talking about high-powered rifles or whatever. You know, we generally don't restrict commerce and we don't restrict technology. If you can think of a better idea, a better way to do something, then we're not going to go out and pass a law every time somebody comes up with a better idea to say this is not, in my opinion, and that's generally government's opinion, which is not always the best opinion, I can guarantee you that. So they go out and say, well, we don't like this, so we're going to ban that. I don't think we want that restrictive of a government to tell people what they can and cannot do. And you know, the point that Representative Brown said, it's a constitutional issue that we've decided that you can bear arms, you can buy the weapons that are out there. We do restrict automatic weapons, obviously, and so I don't see how we can say you can't make a gun better or more powerful. Somebody will figure out how to do it.
And one last question. Some schools have chosen to use clear backpacks for safety. How are these protecting students?
I guess the issue is what can be brought in a backpack and the policy. Again, the relative risk, what is the risk of having something in your backpack? There are millions of backpacks out there, and if one is bad, you know, we create a law because one out of millions and millions causes a problem, or a person associated with that backpack causes a problem.
I think that's a silly rule.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have time for about 3 more students.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Keppel, and I am a freshman. I would just like to know, what can the governments in the federal, state, and local levels do to restrict these potential intruders from purchasing firearms to be used for violence, while not restraining the law-abiding public for their right to bear arms?
I don't know what we can do. As I understand it, most of the, to my best of my knowledge, what I've been read and told that majority of these incidents that have occurred with using weapons that were already in the home. They didn't go out and buy them specifically to go out and create this mayhem. So, you know, that's the balance that we have constantly is how every time we pass a law, we restrict somebody and we to address somebody who's a bad actor. So in my opinion, that we need to vet that carefully and decide how best to address those issues. And I don't know that we can do it in a reasonable manner. So I don't want to restrict your rights to do what you legally can do. We do have what we call a red flag law in the state of Indiana, that if you are perceived to be a threat to yourself or to others, then we can actually remove your weapons from your possession and then go to court and validate why we did that. So I think we're one of only 5 states, I believe, that has that law. It's a little concerning to me that that's a restriction, that's another forfeiture issue, that we're taking your property away from you without due process, but it's for protection of the public, and I think it's a good law. So we just have to be careful about how far we go in restricting people's ability to purchase a legal product.
I think one of the things probably brought up that we need to deal with is technology. I think some of the technology and information, I mean, if you violate a domestic violence order in Illinois, do we know about that in Indiana? Or you have a violent act in Missouri, do we know about that in Indiana? So the federal government needs to get involved and help us, and states also get involved to help with some of the technology and data sharing related to people who have been convicted of problems that raise red flags.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This will be the last student question.
I am Aiden Marth. I am a 9th grader, and a large chunk of gun deaths and injuries in this country happen because of accidents. I was wondering if you believe that something such as requiring training with weapons or requiring parents to talk to their children about if they have weapons in the home can counter this problem?
I know nationally a lot of the organizations do talk about safety training, and there are multiple programs out there. We don't have a mandate in the state of Indiana, and I don't think there's an interest to implement a mandate that you go through a course prior to getting your license. Again, that would be an abridgment of perceived Second Amendment constitutional rights. Though with rights are responsibilities, so I think it's a discussion point, but I don't see that interest right now today.
I would agree. I think it's I think it's very similar to anything else that a young person does. It's parental responsibility to train them and teach them what's right and what's wrong, not just about guns, but about the world. So it would be problematic to me to require that you have that training, but it needs to happen. My biggest fear is often these accidents happen because somebody who is not familiar with a weapon goes to a friend's house and visits and sees a weapon there and does not know how to handle that weapon. And that's the parent's responsibility, I think, to school them on what's the proper handling of a firearm. But it's also up to the parents to make certain those weapons are not loaded when there are children around. So it's personal responsibility, and we've struggled with how you legislate that, and you can't legislate it. It's a social
Mandating
right.
a course back to local school corporation would be an unfunded mandate. I'm sure a lot of people would not like to have on top of, you know, the requirements we already have.
So thank you.
Thank you.
The teachers did send some questions in. Most of them have been answered. One's about article yesterday on WBA, talks about for high schoolers, pressure plus stress equals mental health help. Rocky Killian, you guys know, West Lafayette superintendent, talks about the pressure on the standardized tests. saying 2 weeks out of the year for standardized testing, he says, is inhumane. They interviewed a lady at Family Services in Lafayette, and she said the pressure on kids has rose dramatically in the last 10 years because of state mandated changes. And then going with a shortage of counselors, National Association recommends one counselor for every 250. And I think, a lot of schools at 1 to 400. So that's a comment turned into a question.
A very excellent point as far as counselors and the number of counselors. Again, my perception and my philosophy has been to look at counselors outside of the school funding formula. I think we get into the definition of a counselor and their job description a little bit. We have, I mean, I'm old enough and don't have enough hair, the counselors were helping us plan our life and our vocation going forward, and now counselors have fallen into, the societal issues of our country. And I guess we still need career and vocational guidance and career coaching, and we need counselors on the social emotional well-being on the other hand. I think that is outside of the school funding formula, and I will continue to implement and push and increase through Family and Social Service Administration, through Department of Workforce Development programs that help that and raise the ability of students and move that forward. Testing is tough, and I know we've just gone through a testing window, I believe, here recently. The state, is trying to look at the testing system, and I believe long-term with working collaboratively with the Department of Education, the testing time will go down as we go to pathways of graduation going forward. But a lot of testing that's also being done is a local decision. The state right now only mandates 2 tests going forward, and so a lot of it is the assessment leading to some of the other testing, and whether it's high stakes or not high stakes definition, I think needs to be de-emphasized a little bit. De-emphasized.
Gotcha.
Well, I agree with the points that your individuals made. Testing has gotten way out of control. The last time I talked to one of the superintendents over at Southmont, they're sending 7 weeks testing, 35 days of testing a year in high school. That's way over the top. And that all comes about because of pressure that we have on us as legislators to make certain the schools are performing to the level that we choose, and not just state legislature. We allow the federal government to mandate what we do and how we do it on many cases. So I'm a big proponent of eliminating standardized testing and letting teachers decide, because teachers know whether their children or their students are succeeding or they're not, or if they're getting it, they're not getting it. But we don't give the autonomy to the schools to make that decision, so we mandate testing. I would say that society's put a lot of pressure on students today too. Everybody has to perform. We have social media that puts pressure on kids outside the school system, and so it's a high stress life today that kids are living, and I understand that, and I wish I had an answer for that, but I don't. But it's a discussion that we need to have. But yes, we need to help students as much as we possibly can.
Any closing remarks?
I appreciate the time and interest, and also the thought of everyone here. It has been I think, a very fulfilling and enlightening discussion for me. I appreciate it very much. Thank you all.
Senator Boots?
As well, I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you and open the discussion. I hope we have continuing discussions on these issues. I still go back to my original statement, I guess, that it's the societal problems that we have in the disrespect for authority, not in the disrespect for ourselves. I don't think that our kids, our young students, have a lot of self-esteem in many cases, and those are the ones that are probably going to misbehave and reach out or lash out to somebody. So I think that we have to look at our society, what's going on. You know, I don't know a lot about it, but they talked about this morning on the radio that something car theft or some video game is now sold 90 million versions of this thing, and I think that's a problem in my view, since I'm not a psychologist. But when you can play a game and you kill people and et cetera, and then you hit the reset button and they're all back, I think that kids sometimes get lost in what their responsibilities are, and so we don't have a lot of respect for life, human life, and so that's where we have to go back and fix that problem. And I hope that these young people can move on and change our society going into the future, and they won't have to deal with those issues, or their kids won't have to deal with that issues. So once again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I hope that we continue these discussions.
So thank you, guys. This is what being a American citizen is. It's finding out what the issues are, discussing issues with people you disagree with in a civil manner, and caring. And I hope you guys will all be educated voters, stay involved. This concludes it. Thank you guys very much. Now it's time to go to third period. Thank you.
Buzz.